Before I stepped up here, my good colleague from the Senate said, "Go get 'em, Mom." And that's quite frankly what this is all about. It's about the next generation. It's about being able to sustain our great nation. Understanding that some level of financial restraints are absolutely necessary at this point. When we have, and I apologize, carrying two little ones does steal your breath. When you have the excessive debt that our nation faces, we're at a crossroads where we need to actually take a pause and talk about what the Constitution bears and what our founders gave us as tools to combat this excessive abuse that we've seen in our nation. So without a question, we're at a point in time where the Article 5 Convention of the States is a project that's not only necessary, it's the only way to take our nation back from special interests and from establishment elites who've ran our country into the ground. So I'm incredibly blessed just to be a co-sponsor, a prime sponsor of this legislation, to work amongst a lot of caring people in the state legislature who believe in this initiative, who've partnered with us in the Senate, who recognize that it's you, the people, that we're serving rather than the special interests and those who have gotten so far off path. So we're just blessed to be here with you today. I won't take up a lot of time, but needless to say, this is one of the greatest pieces of legislation I've had the privilege of working on over the last 8 years, because I recognize that bringing the power back to the states, empowering our locals to make decisions about where our nation's future lies, is the only way that we can restore any faith in the Republic and in the people that should have the reins of power. So thank you so much. Appreciate you all being here today. God bless and enjoy this beautiful weather.
Thank you, Representative Hagan. Next, I'll like to have you hear from Senator Matt Huffman. He is our primary sponsor in the Ohio Senate. Thank you, Senator.
Thanks very much, Mike. I appreciate it. Pretty inspiring to have a not yet 30-year-old involved in this fight. Representative Hagan's been with us from the very beginning, a current and future leader. Much in the future, I guess. She's going to be around long after many of us are not around, so it's that part is very encouraging. This is a pretty simple process, really. Every club you belong to, if you belong to some business organization, they have a ruling document, a constitution, bylaws, whatever it is they call it, and in all of those documents, there's a way to amend the document. And that's what we have in Article 5 in the U.S. Constitution, because as they drafted it and as they approved it in 1787, they realized, well, there's stuff we'll probably have to change. Read the Federalist Papers. All of the folks at the convention knew that. So they knew that the Bill of Rights was going to come quickly, and it did, just a few years after the passage of the Constitution. So we've amended the Constitution 27 times. What they also understood was that if one person or a small group of people centralized in one location were making the decisions, that they would abuse their power. Now, that didn't just happen, they didn't just think of that. Of course, they knew what the King of England was doing, but that's happened throughout the history of man and will continue and continues to happen today. Whether you live in China, whether you live in Saudi Arabia, whether you live in the United States of America. The 6 largest growing counties in the United States are the 6 counties that surround Washington, D.C. So this budget fight isn't about whether we have enough money to take care of poor people or disabled people or build bridges and roads. It's about people getting rich off of the government. That's the real fight that's going on here. And that's why Washington can't solve this problem. If we had 218 Jim Jordans in the House and 60 Jim Jordans in the Senate, we could solve the problem real quickly. Only in Washington, D.C. is a guy who says we should balance the budget every year. Only in Washington, D.C. is he seen as a radical. It's amazing. It really is. He's somehow an ultra-conservative. I was with Jim, and my wife and I went out to dinner with Jim and Polly this weekend in Washington, and it's really strange. You walk around the town and you see all of these, the grandeur and all that, and it's great to have that as part of our national capital. Certainly, we went to the Museum of Bible and things like that. It was really fantastic. But you get this sense that there's a sense of entitlement, not by someone who wants to keep getting a check, but this is we build all of this, and you can come and visit us for a while, but you go back to your home and keep paying taxes, and we'll take care of this. And that's the sense that you get in Washington. So very simply, the fiscal problem cannot be solved in Washington, D.C. If you don't need any other proof of that, there's much proof of that over the past 50 or 60 years especially. You see that we just passed a legislation that added $1 trillion onto our debt. And then a few days later, we voted on a balanced budget amendment. We didn't get 2/3 of the vote, so we can't do that. So this process, in my mind, and that's why I started doing this 10 years ago with the first resolution I introduced and we passed, along with Senator Coley and Senator Hagan's support, is really, in my mind, the only way to do this. The job that Mark Meckler and everyone else has done on this is incredible. This kind of sustained national organization year after year is the only way to get this done. We have been involved in other organizations, and I know our other legislators have been involved in that also. But without the private sector being directly involved in funding and doing all this, this isn't going to happen. Hopefully a year from now, we're going to have a Convention of States rally in front of the State House. And as people begin to realize what this movement is about, we'll have double the size of the people here, and then 10 times as many 3 years from now. This is it. This is the moment. If we can't do it with the people in Washington now, it's not going to happen. So it is up to a convention of the states to save our country. So I'm very proud and thankful to Mark and everyone in the organization, your state director, and thank them for doing that. And I thank Representative Hagan and Senator Coley for their leadership on this too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Huffman. Next, Senator Bill Coley, who is a co-sponsor in the Senate and also committee chairman in the committee that's hearing this, would like to say a few words. Thank you, Senator Coley.
If I didn't do that, Representative Hagan was, and then I'd have to turn in my man card for letting her do that instead of me. You know, it's a difficult process, and democracy and our government is a fragile thing, and it's built on trust. It's built on faith in each other. You know, it's often what has value in life, and you look at this thing and you go, it's a piece of paper. It's not particularly good for a whole lot because there's not a whole lot of space to write on it or do anything productive with it. But because we have faith in each other and faith in our government and faith in our ability to work together, we agree to accept that as currency in a transaction. And by doing that, we have built, if you study the history of man, you know, it took so long for man to be able to evolve above the other species. And when man did, and human beings became more dominant on the planet, was when we had trust and faith in each other and we worked together cooperatively. And then we found out, hey, if this guy's really good at building things with wood and I'm really good at agriculture, why doesn't he do this, and then I'll give him some of mine, and then he gives me some of it. And we built this whole economy built on specialization. But it only works because we have faith in each other, and we have faith in the future, and we have a common belief that things will get better. And that's something that is hard to keep going, and it's real easy to have it fall apart. You know, Senator Huffman, my longtime friend, you know, mentioned some of the things that are going on in D.C. And you're seeing it right now as you guys work on this project, and you're seeing that people will go to fear right away. That is their trump card. We're going to scare the bejesus out of anybody that's going to fight with us on this. We're going to tell them they're going to lose their Social Security. We're going to tell them, see, as soon as I said that, that'll be the quote of the day. Oh, he said they're going to lose their Social Security. Oh, we're not going to have education. We're not going to have roads, bridges, all that kind of stuff. That's nonsense. We can get it done. But the big fear is what happens when the inevitable things happen, massive earthquakes? We're on a planet that happens. What do you do? How do you handle that shock to the economy? Massive hurricanes come. What do you do? How do you handle that shock to the economy? And we have gotten into a habit of just spending and spending and spending so much that we don't have the rainy day funds. We don't have the money set aside, and we just keep letting this debt build. And we have seen and we've learned from the mistakes of others that have let their debts build so high that they couldn't pay them. And we don't have to pay the national debt today or tomorrow, but we have to make sure that it is a reasonable number, that we can all have faith that we can continue to transact business as we go forward, and we can continue to trust each other, and each of us specialize in what we're best at and build our economy from there. You know, you guys have a really, really tough job. And I'm not talking about the meetings you're going to have today with our colleagues in the House or the Senate. Those are tough meetings, but remember, senators and representatives, you know, technically we're called leaders, but realistically, we just follow what our constituents are saying. And that's the tough meeting you have to have. Your next door neighbor, your college-age child, your parents and grandparents. You have to convince them of the wisdom of this process. And we have to win this battle over the fence post every day. And when that becomes the commonly held belief is, you know what, that's right, this is crazy. We do need to start containing this stuff. We need to let the states decide. We don't need to have one policy. You know, I tell people around Ohio all the time that Columbus is not omnipotent. We don't know everything. We don't know what's best for everyone. Well, if we don't know what's best for everyone in Ohio, I guarantee you Washington, D.C. doesn't know what's best for everybody in Ohio. And so we need to convince our neighbors and our friends and our family of the wisdom of this process. And that, my friends, is the difficult task that you guys are agreeing to take on, and I applaud you for it. I will continue, as will my colleagues, Representative Hagan and Senator Huffman will continue to work inside the legislature for these values. But when over the next year and 2 years, if we can build that consensus among our friends, our neighbors, and our family that this is the right path, it's time. The one question I tell to everybody on this, y'all believe in the Second Amendment, but what good is the Second Amendment if the burglar is in your house, he's attacking your children, and you won't pull the gun out? Well, my friends, the question I ask every member is, how bad does it have to get before you're willing to call an Article 5 convention? You know, oh, the runaway convention, oh, this is really, how bad does it have to get before you realize that we need our founding fathers? You all want to say how wise they were and they did all these great things. Well, they put Article 5 there for a reason. We have never pulled it out of the bag, and it's time. And I ask you guys to not only talk to our colleagues in the House and the Senate as you're here today, but every day forward. Make sure you win the hearts and minds of your friends, your neighbors, your families, and your loved ones. Thanks for everything you do today, and thanks for being here, and we will work for you and with you in the future until we get this across the goal line. Thank you for being here.
The question facing us and facing our fellow countrymen is a two-word question, very simply, who decides? The American founders had a simple answer: we, the people, decide.